If the shizzle hit the fan in a foreign country, could you survive? What would be your game plan? Well, I've been an international sales and business development guy for most of my career, decades. People have asked me over the years as I go out and about, because I'm, as you might imagine, I've had to travel a lot through my life. People have asked me, aren't you afraid of dying in a foreign land? The answer to that is no. I suspect the procedure is the same regardless of the country you die in, so no, not really. And as far as dwelling on, your mortal demise in general, it's not a good idea. The brave person dies but once, a coward dies 1,000 times in his own mind. I'm sure we've all died a few times in our own minds. Why put yourself through that? So no, I don't think about that. Right now I'm in northern Spain, just south of the Pyrenees, the border of France. I'm sitting in a Spanish national park. I climbed up to Ibon de Escarpinosa. That's a waterfall spilling down into the lake. You can hear behind me. I hope it's not too loud. It seems really loud to me, so hopefully you can hear my voice over it. When I came on this trip, several people asked me, if you were caught in a foreign country, when the shizzle hits the gizzle, what would be your game plan? And I have to say, there's not a one-size-fits-all answer for that. It depends entirely on which country, where in the country. It goes without saying, you'll be caught flat-footed, you'll have little preparation, you'll have very little local knowledge, more or less. If I were caught in that scenario in Asia, I'd probably try to make my way to my farm in Thailand. Even if I had to, walk thousands of miles, at least it would give me a goal to work towards. Probably. If I were in North or South America, that's pretty clear too. I'd head to Idaho, try to get, eventually get home. It might take you a year or two, but the goal would be to get there eventually and alive. But I'm in Spain right now, so yeah, heading down to North Africa, not a good idea. Heading up into Western Europe, if it hits the fan, if the grid goes down, that would be one of the last places I would want to be is Europe. So I'd probably resign myself to the reality that I'm going to have to try and survive in Spain. And I'm in northern Spain. There are worse places to try and survive than North Spain. There's a lot of water up here. It's clean, green. This is sheep herding country. So, I'd probably go down into the valley, try to form a tribe, and get assimilated into a tribe, and try and survive until some semblance of normalcy returned, and then I'd try to get back to the U.S. and see if I could find anybody I know. But as far as living off the land, oh come on, what are you gonna eat up here? A few snakes, bugs, grubs. I saw one duck. Good luck trying to catch that. I don't have a firearm. Don't have a knife. Fire wouldn't really avail me much because, why? It's not that cold. It's probably going to get cold up here tonight. But I'm not that far out. I'm maybe 10 miles away from the nearest mountain village, so I'd make a beeline for that. As far as living off the land, yeah, that would be a slow, agonizing death. I think you'd eventually die of starvation. There's plenty of water up here. The water's fantastic, by the way. I drank some of it coming out of the side of the mountain, ice cold. But when my buddy asked me, what would I do to survive in a foreign country, it reminded me of it had been years since I even thought about this old guy. I used to live in Korea. In fact, I spent 11 years in Korea. Yeah, of course I speak Korean. And while I was there, I befriended this elderly guy. This is back, I think it was like mid to late 80s. I befriended this elderly Korean guy who, once he started to warm up to me, he started opening up, and he started to regale me with stories of his life, and his stories were absolutely horrifying, mesmerizing, but horrifying. He came from, I still remember, he came from a small city in the very southern tip of Korea called Masan. And when he was a teenager, the Imperial Japan had colonized Korea, and they had occupied Korea, and they swooped him up and conscripted him for the Imperial Japanese Army. And they marched him off to China, and where he had to engage in the most atrocious behavior. He said it was living hell. And the Japanese campaign in China rolled into World War II. He fought all through that. Saw a lot of horrific things. We won't get down into the bunny weeds just yet, but maybe I'll unpack that a little bit later when I have more time. But he, suffice to say, he had an awful time. Finally, the World War II was winding to a close. The Japanese army was beating a hasty retreat out of China. There wasn't a lot to eat. They ate snakes and bugs and meat off dead bodies. But he said the most delicious thing was rats. And he said to this day, that was back in the 80s, to this day, when I see a rat, when other people see rats, they say yuck. When I see a rat, I say yum. So yeah, they used to catch rats and roast them on a stick, and he said that was some fine eating. But they ate what they could. They did what they had to survive as they crossed China through Manchuria, and towards the end with the Soviet army hot on their heels. And he said that some people, didn't matter whether they were strong or weak physically, when they gave up mentally, they just died. And he said you could see it. You could see, a few days before they die, you'd see them in their eyes, they'd given up. And he said that there were times when he thought it pointless to go on, but he continued to push on because he wanted to get home. All he wanted to do was get home to his mom, see his family, see his house one more time. If he could just do that, he'd be happy to die. Anyway, he made it back to the top of Korea, and before winter was setting in, he got rid of his Japanese uniform and put on some civilian clothes he found on a dead body. And he found a small village where there were some elderly people still trying to survive, and they were kind enough to take him in. I don't recall precisely how long he was there. It seemed like he was there a couple of years because his health was bad. He was trying to regain his health so he could return home. And while he was there, the communists came. The communists came, these are Korean communists, and they decided he would be a great addition to their army, and their growing army, so he had to put on another uniform and join the North Koreans. Long story short, he fought with the North Koreans, ended up way down at the bottom of Korea, at the Korean Peninsula, just outside of Busan. He was involved in the Busan perimeter, if you're familiar with the Korean War. And he kept thinking, I'm so close to home. I'm so close to Masan. I could just throw down my gun and run, but he knew if you got caught, that was curtains for you. Well, fortunately or unfortunately, it was his fate to be captured by South Koreans. The South Koreans captured him, threw him in a POW camp for a while, until they figured out his story, and they realized he was just some poor soul that got caught up into, you know, an unfortunate event. He was not an ideological communist. He was from Masan, and they decided they're going to do him a favor, and they turned him into a South Korean soldier. So he was a South Korean soldier and fought throughout the Korean War on the side of the South, the rest of the Korean War. Finally, when there was an armistice, at last he got to take off his uniform, and then he had to walk all the way back down to the bottom of South Korea. But he finally got to see his mother and home. And he said, you know, he said, I often puzzle on how I made it through all of that. And when so many stronger, braver, you know, more macho guys lived, this scrawny little malnourished guy, he survived. And he said, I think it was just because I wanted so badly to live and to get home, even if I died the next day, just so I could see home one more time. So I suspect it's a matter of will, regardless of where we find ourselves in unfortunate circumstances. That said, I'm not gonna stay here and cook grass soup and eat worms, because I have oranges in my backpack and I'm heading down. All right, hasta luego. I'm out of here.